How's it going, everybody? I hope you're having a great day, and I hope the weather by you is better than it is by me because it is pretty cold and dreary outside today. And since I can't get outside, I figured I'd shoot a video here in the kitchen and talk about nutrition. One of the most common questions I get on my nutritional videos is why don't I cook with oil, and how do I cook oil-free? So in this video, I'm going to tell you everything you guys need to know about oil-free cooking and why I do it. So let's talk all about vegetable oils, right? Like olive oil, avocado oil, coconut oil, any kind of oil is what I'm talking about in this video. And don't you want to include that in your diet? I mean, haven't we heard that oil is good for you? First, we're going to take a look at the nutritional side of oil. Like how much nutrition does it contain compared to whole foods? And then we're going to talk a little bit about the cardiovascular aspect of consuming oil. All right, I'm going to have to crouch down like this in order to get everything in frame. But here I have some spinach. This is spinach from my fridge. It's 1 pound of spinach. And here in the drawer, right here, I've got a tablespoon measurer. Okay, this is 1 tablespoon. Now, there's no oil in it, but let's pretend I put oil in it. So that is 1 tablespoon of oil, and that's equivalent to 120 calories of pure fat. And now here we have a pound of spinach, and that pound of spinach, 16 ounces, has only 105 calories. So right there, I want to show you guys visually the difference here. I'm not saying you should eat a pound of spinach, okay? But what I'm saying is when we compare whole foods to refined fats like oil and butter, look at the difference. There's more calories in this tiny little spoonful of oil than in this entire pound of greens. Now, to make this even worse, oil is pure fat. Like I mentioned, there is 0 protein, 0 carbohydrate, 0 fiber, 0 minerals, and just trace amounts of certain vitamins, but it's negligible. The amount of vitamins you get in oil, you can easily get from whole foods. I mean, there's really no benefit at all to oil. There's nothing in oil that you can't get from eating real whole food. Now, while we're on the subject of the volume of these foods, like the big difference here, I want to talk about the different receptors in your stomach. Okay, and these receptors, what they do is they trigger the production of hormones that signal to your brain that you're full and that you're satiated. There's volume receptors, which go off when your stomach expands and you're physically full, like the volume is taken up. And then you have density receptors. And density receptors are triggered by the caloric density of what you ate. So when you eat enough calories, then those receptors go off. Another big problem with oil is that it just doesn't lend to the volume receptors. It won't set those off, right? Whereas if you eat whole foods, again, I'm not saying you should only eat spinach, but if you had some sweet potatoes with the spinach, right, and some beans and some other things, then that would not only fill your stomach to set off the volume receptors, but there'd be enough calories to also trigger the density receptors. Whereas if you add a lot of caloric density with oil, I mean, you might actually set off the density receptors without filling the volume of your stomach, and then you're not really truly satiated. All right, so I'm telling you this information about oil and whole foods, and I'm using spinach specifically. This is baby spinach for the example. But how do you know I'm being honest here? How do you know that the information is accurate? Well, let me take you into a nutritional database that I like to use. It's an app called Cronometer. And for those of you who are new to my channel and you haven't seen me work with this and recommend it, I highly suggest, if you're interested in learning about nutrition or just making sure you're eating right for your goals, Cronometer is the way to go. So I'm going to put a link down below if you want to sign up for it. All you need is an email address to use this app. But let's dive in and let's compare 1 tablespoon of oil to 16 ounces of spinach so you can see for yourself what I'm talking about. So here I am logged into Cronometer. I'm going to click on Add Food and then type in olive oil. And there we go. Olive oil, 1 tablespoon, add. And now we have 1 tablespoon of olive oil. You can see it's 119 calories. So my apologies, I said 120. I was off by 1 calorie. But let's take a look over here. If I zoom in, you can see out of that 119 calories, it's all fat. There's 0 protein, 0 carbohydrate, just 13.5 grams of fat. And now scrolling down further to the micronutrients, you can see under vitamins, practically everything is 0 except right here you can see there are trace amounts of vitamin E and vitamin K, but you can easily get that from other foods. It doesn't make olive oil special in any way. And then if you scroll down here further, you can see minerals, and there's literally 0% of every mineral except for iron has 1%. Over here, nothing for amino acids because there's no protein. And you can see there is some omega-3s and omega-6s in here for fat, but it's not very much, considering how many calories you're getting of pure fat. So that is the pretty pitiful nutrient profile for olive oil. Now let's take a look at the spinach that we were comparing it to. So I'm just going to right click this olive oil entry right here and delete that. Alright, and now I'm going to click on add food again, and I'm going to type in baby spinach. And I'm going to add that. First I'm going to change this to ounces because we're measuring ounces, type 16, and there we go. So here's our 1 pound of baby spinach, and now look here, 104 calories, all right? So one less than I thought when I said 105, and we have 13 grams of protein, 16 grams of carbohydrate, and very little fat at just under 2 grams. So now let's look at the micronutrients for spinach. Oh, look at that. A lot more color going on down here under vitamins and minerals. You can see all the B vitamins except for B12, which is expected, is represented there. You have lots of folate, lots of vitamin C, tons of vitamin A. Vitamin K is through the roof too. You got some vitamin E in there, a lot more than the olive oil. So that's really good. Even minerals down here are quite abundant as well. You have lots of calcium, iron, magnesium, manganese, potassium. So you can see there's a lot more nutritive value in spinach. And despite only having 2 grams of fat, look here, this is almost 40% of what we need for omega-3 for the day. So that's more than what we got from 120 calories of olive oil, and this is only 104 calories of spinach. So hopefully now that we did the deep dive into the nutrition, you understand why when people say empty calories, what they really mean by that, okay? This 1 tablespoon of oil has 120 calories of pure fat, no other nutrition whatsoever, and you need that other nutrition. So if a lot of your calories, your energy that you need to expend, are coming with little nutritive value, then why are you eating it, right? It's empty calories. In fact, oil, I think, is the perfect example. It is the epitome of empty calories. Wait, I thought oil was hyped up because it has the essential fatty acids, right? Like olive oil has omega-3 fatty acids, and fish oil has omega-3s too. And we get too many omega-6s in comparison to omega-3s, so we should be getting more omega-3s and we should be eating oil. No, that's not how it works. I mean, they try to sell it with that point, but that's not a good selling point actually, because you can get your omega-3s from a lot of different sources. For example, right here to my right is the refrigerator, and in there I know right off the top of my head that I have flaxseed, and flaxseed is a great source of omega-3. Right here in front of me, the spinach that I used in the example here, spinach has omega-3. Over here to my left is our pantry, and in the pantry there's tons of different sources of omega-3. One that comes to mind because I just ate it last night is walnuts. Walnuts are one of my favorite nuts, and they are a great source of omega-3s. And here's something interesting. You can find your omega-3 fatty acids in so many places that they're actually growing through the cracks of our sidewalks here in Illinois. And I'm not kidding, I'm not exaggerating. There is a common weed here in the Midwest United States called purslane. And purslane is highly regarded, I guess, as a superfood because it's so nutritious and it has more omega-3s per calorie than any kind of fish, like salmon or any kind of fish oil capsule. I don't want to get too crazy here with all the different examples, but my point is you don't need to eat oil to get the essential fatty acids. They are found in whole foods and in a lot more places than you think. Okay, all this talk about why I cook oil-free, but how about now I show you how I do it? And really the how is pretty simple. The answer is I use water when I saute. And I'll show you an example on the stovetop, but everything else, like I bake and roast things in the oven, I'll make soups and stews and chilies in a crock pot. I blend a lot of things, but really what it comes down to is whenever something calls for oil, I either omit the oil or I use water if it's to prevent burning and sticking to the pan. Here, real quick, before we get started, I just want to show you this. Yeah, we went apple picking yesterday with my brother and sister-in-law. Check that out. I think we're set on apples for a while. All right, first things first, you want to keep a glass of water nearby. And the reason why is you're going to add water to the frying pan. Now you can see here I added maybe, I don't know, 3 or 4 tablespoons of water. And then I go ahead and turn on the burner and I just let it heat up for a while. And eventually what you're going to find is the water in the pan starts to sort of steam and boil a little bit. And then you're ready to start adding your vegetables. The first thing I always like to add is onion and any garlic that I'm using in the recipe. And I just cook it maybe for 3 to 5 minutes or so until the onion starts to look translucent and you can really smell the deliciousness of the onion and garlic coming out. While that's cooking, I'll stir occasionally, and if it's sticking, I'll just add another tablespoon of water, and that helps it not stick. Then I add any root vegetables I might be using. In this case, it's carrots, because those are typically pretty hard and need to cook longer, so carrots go in first. And I stir those around with the onion, and that's another, I don't know, 3 to 5 minutes or so, just until the carrots really start to get cooked a little bit and look nice and orange. Again, I make sure to stir occasionally while it's cooking, and if it sticks, I just add a little more water, and that prevents the sticking and burning. At this point, the rest of the veggies can go in. I have 2 types of squash here, yellow squash and zucchini, as well as red bell peppers. So I'm going to stir those around, and once you get all the veggies in there, if you're using a lot like me, typically the vegetables, they secrete a lot of water during the cooking process, and you don't really have to add any more water at this point. I just add spices, whatever, spices you feel like using, and let it cook. So where did this idea that oil is healthy really come from? Well, there was a study done in the 1970s in Spain, and this is where the famous Mediterranean diet comes from, okay? In this study, they compared multiple diets, and what they found was the group eating the Mediterranean diet had a significantly lower incidence of heart disease, cancer, and other degenerative diseases in comparison to people eating, say, the standard American diet and other such diets. Somehow, the researchers concluded that the reason why the Mediterranean diet had a lower rate of disease was because they were using olive oil instead of butter. And I don't really know, I haven't figured out why they drew that conclusion, and it doesn't really make a whole lot of sense, because they didn't take into account the fact that the Mediterranean diet is a plant-predominant diet, meaning it's not fully vegetarian. There's still, some fish and some meat in it, but it's significantly less animal products and less processed foods in comparison to the standard American diet. And they somehow didn't consider that. They just assumed, oh, it must be the olive oil, and that's why they're healthier. Since the 1970s, throughout like the 80s and the 90s and the aughts, there's been a lot more research done on oil and how it affects our bodies. And researchers now have concluded that had the Mediterranean diet group excluded oil from their diet, they would have had an even lower rate of disease, because oil is actually damaging our arteries, it's damaging the endothelium and impacting our body's ability to produce nitric oxide, which helps blood travel through our arteries. I follow a lot of medical doctors when it comes to nutrition, because a lot of these doctors actually implement the diets in their practice to see the benefits on their patients, and some of the results are amazing. And one of those doctors that I follow is Dr. Caldwell Esselstyn Jr. Now, Esselstyn, he's been in a lot of documentaries and stuff, but his books are really the best resource if you want to learn about his research. And one of the books I highly recommend by Esselstyn is Prevent and Reverse Heart Disease. In this book, Esselstyn explains how oil, along with other foods, damages the endothelium and the results he's seen by excluding those foods from the diet. So if you're someone who maybe has like heart disease runs in your family, or maybe you've been diagnosed with high blood pressure or high cholesterol, like one of the symptoms of heart disease, I highly recommend reading this book. Read it cover to cover, because that's what I did, and the information is amazing. Okay, it's life-changing. I'll put a link down below if you want to get the book on Amazon, but if you don't want to buy it, just go to your local library. Anyways, Esselstyn has been kind of one of the pioneers in looking at oil since the 1970s, since that Mediterranean diet study. And what he's concluded is that we're better off without oil, and the Mediterranean group would have been much healthier without it. because of the damage it does to our bodies. Okay, so that is oil-free cooking in a nutshell. I explained the nutritional side of it and why it really is just the epitome of empty calories. I also explained the cardiovascular aspect to it, and I just showed you how I saute without oil. And when it comes to certain things like French fries, for instance, you're just not going to be able to duplicate French fries and other kinds of recipes without oil. You'll never get it the same. What I do with French fries is I French fry the potatoes and then I bake them and I flip them halfway through the baking process. I also use the broiler to kind of toast them and get them a little crunchy, but without oil, they're just not the same. So there are certain recipes that you just won't taste again if you're eating oil-free. And that's why I'm not 100% oil-free. I'd be lying if I said I never eat oil. Instead, it's just like whenever I cook, I don't use oil. When my wife cooks, it's hit or miss. Sometimes she'll cook oil-free, sometimes not. But she does give me a heads up. She says, hey Ryan, I'm using oil in tonight's recipe if you want to eat something else. And when we go out to a restaurant, it can be pretty challenging to not eat oil, so that's usually a cheat meal for me too. But the way I approach these things in nutrition is more of like a best effort, right? Instead of focusing on being 100% compliant and beating myself up, I like to take the approach of persistence, not perfection. Meaning, as long as I keep trying my best and not worrying about being perfect, then that's good enough for me. All right, those veggies smell really good, so I'm gonna make some rice to go along with it, maybe some marinated baked tofu as well, and I'm gonna have some lunch. So I'm gonna go do that, and make sure you give this video a like. Please give it a like if it helped you and you found it interesting, and subscribe if you're new to Minus the Gym, because I love talking about nutrition and body weight exercise. That's what my channel is all about. So do that, and I will see you in the next video. All right, see ya.